Our next keynote speaker needs no introduction. He is Dr. Amer Rawas. Dr. Amer, personally, I've known him since he was a professor at the University Sultan Qaboos, and he has an exemplary leadership, a successful track, and I'll say a few words to introduce him. He's a transformation leader who specializes in artificial intelligence. From a time when we did not hear the word artificial intelligence, he has been educated and working in this area. He works in advanced technologies and innovation. He serves as a consultant for international entities like the United Nations. He serves as a consultant for international agencies and provides advice and guidance on digital transformation and leadership development. During the long corporate career which Dr. Amer had after his academic career, and he goes back to academics again, Dr. Amer had the pleasure to work in the advancement of several industries in Oman and the region, including telecommunications. We've known him as the CEO of Oman Tel, and he also is the chairman of Oman Society for Petroleum Services. He's worked in the oil and gas industry, solar, renewable energy, and industrial development, education included. He's on the board of Oman Academic Accreditation Authority and Quality Assurance, Oman Education Council. Dr. Amer holds a PhD in computer science and artificial intelligence from Sussex University, UK. Currently, he's the non-resident dean of the School of Information Technology and Business at New Vision University, Georgia. Without further delay, I welcome Dr. Amer Rawas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sadaq, for a generous introduction. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Bakhit Amri, Excellencies, ambassadors, business leaders, dear delegates, Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. Thanks to His Excellency Dr. Salim Al-Razaqi, he's set the scene for us to basically now start the real business. But I will maybe start light by just introducing the scene that I hope that all the more qualified, less rusty than I, experts in the delegates will be covering along with the scholars who are going to be presenting. So allow me to start without further ado. Now, I'm not going to bore you with too many statistics because I know the professionals that will come will probably give you more recent statistics with perhaps more recent quotes on implications of statistics. This is not working. So oh yeah, it's now working. So maybe I'll start with storytelling, just reminding you. As humans, we have proven time after time that we have short memory. And I think people used to me moving, so maybe I should start moving. So yeah, let's start with the history, storytelling. We've forgotten that over the last 250 years, we've been through 3 revolutions, and now the 4th that we're just, the imminent one is the 4th one. I think we've already stepped in, but we like to talk about it as the next trip. We like to look forward to it or afraid of it, as some scholars have said. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the social impact as well as the economic impact, not the technologies that were introduced in those revolutions. So around 250 years ago, we had the revolution, which was the first industrial revolution, which had a major impact. And it wasn't the civil war in the US, which had the huge civil rights impact. However, the more important impact that now industries moved from the rural areas to the big cities. So there was urban migrations. People used to make things at home. The local carpenter, the local smith will make all the tools, and then they will take them to the city to sell them. What happened with this first revolution? No, things are not coming from the villages anymore. Things are being built in the cities. So people migrated to the cities. Huge urban migration happened around the world, but particularly the Western world where this all started. In the second revolution, with the advent of the lifts, when we created the lifts, yet even more urban migration came. People who couldn't afford a villa or a castle in the city now could live in an apartment, because thanks to the second revolution, we have the lifts. We can go up to as many floors as we want to. So new people moved in. That also had in the link with the third industrial revolution, an impact on how we live as a society, and created individualism. Now people can live alone. You move from a village to the city and you live alone. So society changed as we know it. And the advent of what was called yuppies at the time, in the 80s, early 80s, this term started, where young urban professionals will move from the villages to the city and live on their own and live for their own. They were called the selfish segment of society. So they make money, they spend it on themselves, they have their own luxury flat, their own sports car, and so on. That was the yuppies culture at the time. And then we moved on to the creation of yet another change in society, because don't worry, I'll bring you back to HR, because society, I mean, HR is based on human resources, and human resources what makes up our society. So we created a new segment called DINKs, dual income, no kids. So these are two urban professionals who moved to the city, decided to get married, but because they're after growing their career, they don't want to have kids. So they delay the kids part in order to pursue career. These people needed different things, needed a different environment of work. But those who decide to have kids, also they want a different environment of work from the HR. They want flexible hours. Mothers who are breastfeeding infants want to go home early, want to spend time with their kids, want to work from home. Technology did not enable it then. It does enable it now, especially after COVID. Now, what will the fourth industrial revolution bring in terms of societal impact? Most scholars say it will turn us into a leisure society. There will simply not be enough work for us as humans, as all these machines that will be created around us will be doing most of the work, especially as Amer and His Excellency Dr. Salim mentioned. All the repetitive work will be done by, I also say the intrusive work as well. Sometimes we don't want people to come into our lives. We would welcome a robot, hoping that the robot will not talk about what he sees in our house to other robots. But the idea is we don't like intrusiveness, and machines will not only take repetitive, boring jobs, they'll also take systematic, complex jobs as well as intrusive jobs. So when all these machines around us take most of the work, we will have much more time to have leisure and to enjoy ourselves. But that in itself will create other jobs and other entrepreneurial opportunities, because you go for a lifestyle product when you go for leisure. You go, let's say, to dining out. I was talking to RC yesterday, that we are now witnessing in India, for example, that dinks, dual income, no kids, they go to eat outside 4 times a week. That is not something that is being part of the Indian culture, right? So, and this basically goes to confirm what Dr. Salim said, that, okay, some jobs will go, but new jobs of a different type, especially leisure, more leisure and service type, will be created. So in short, human will be freed to do what they do best. And we have to decide what is that. And we'll leave that for you to talk about and in the rest of the conference. So let me talk about the impact of one technology. So away from statistics, just one example of how one technology can change the scene in the workplace in many, many jobs. So the driverless cars, the autonomous cars, I like to call them autonomous cars. What do? Not only they basically free us up, they replace the trains. I remember I lived in England for 12 years. I remember, when I used to go to Brighton by car, my British friends criticized me. Why can't you take the train? You could read in the train. So I tried it. And it's a totally different experience. You read on your way up, you read on your way down, and it becomes much more useful, much more functional. Especially if you're a researcher, you need to read. And at the time, it was very useful. Now, this will also mean, so there's no driver, so driver job's gone. And remember when I was talking, Your Excellency, to the Minister of Labor about 5 years ago about this, they said we have 43,000 drivers in Oman, full-time jobs, and people have stayed. What are we going to do with those if we have, trucks now being driven, self-driven? Hopefully, not in the next 5 years in Oman, but we'll have to find solutions soon. But not only that, it would also take away the car dealership, because now you don't have to own the car. You can go to work in a car like this, and you can lease it online. It will come to you and pick you up and take you to work every day. You can also choose to pool with other people. Another societal change. In the past, people, parents told us don't mix with strangers. Now the car will suggest, why don't you save money and we take someone else? And most people will agree, because carpooling has become a culture. Now, you go to work on this, but you go for your date in a car like this, or for your party, and you don't have to own it, right? So you book another car to pick you up to the date, and you don't have to worry about parking it. All the valet parking people have gone, right? And so just going now to the jobs. So the salesman jobs, this is the guy with the gray hair, the one that convinces you to buy the car. That he's got a job. The next guy who makes it difficult for you to buy the car, the finance guy, the car leasing finance company guy, he might lose his job too if you are not buying cars anymore. So car leasing industry will also be affected. Next, and this is how it's going to be affected. You're gonna book your car online, depending on your purpose, your occasion, the number of family members that you're going to carry, everything, the color. You pick the car and it comes to you. But next to that, also, the people who work in the after sale of cars will also be reduced significantly, because all new electrical self-driven cars will have very, very few mechanical moving parts. Other than the wheels, it will be the suspension. So the suspension is the future of mechanics, and all other mechanics will have to find jobs elsewhere, maybe short-term in the, let's say, oil and gas industry. But they say even the people who do body work, not only the mechanics, will be less, because they're hoping that smart self-driven cars will have less accidents than wild drivers in the street. So this way, this is just one industry, and you can see one technology, how it's already affected us. This is why, I'm sorry, I think I'm going trigger happy with this. So this is an interesting quote from Thomas Friedman. Mother Nature works in a way such that those who survive are not necessarily the smartest or the strongest, but the most adaptive. So Dr. Salam mentioned the word adaptability, and so did Amer this morning. It's very important, and I hope it forms a central part of your discussion for the next 3 days. So it's all about adaptability. Now, we've talked in the past about IQ, and we are all tested on IQ for our jobs. When I got a job in America, I was tested in IQ before I went to America. I was still in England, so they tested me online on IQ. So that was the thing that gets you in. But theory says IQ gets you in, EQ gets you promoted in the jobs. So you had the IQ and the EQ. Now, adaptability quotient is the most important thing going forward, the ability to adapt. So adaptability intelligence is the future. And adaptability, unlike the others, where we talk about IQ as an individual IQ, EQ as an individual EQ, emotional intelligence. But when we talk about adaptability intelligence, we're talking about adaptability at different layers. We're talking at adaptability at the organizational layer, at the team layer, but also, and most importantly, at the leader layer. Most leaders that lead now are from the X generation. That means my generation. X doesn't mean cross it out, it just means X. So the X generation is leading Y generation and millennials. So they have to adapt their leadership style in order to be able to continue to inspire the productivity of Y generation people. And last but not least is the individual. The individual is the nucleus of society, as we talked earlier, but also of any productive entity, be it an organization, a team, or an individual. Okay, I'm going to skip this one because Dr. Salim and Amer covered the statistics. Now, what other changes are happening? So we talked about how technology changes society, but economists and businessmen have changed the way they work. Most of the innovation that has happened in the last 30 years has not been innovation in products and services. There's been innovation in business models. Uber is not a product innovation. It's the same cars, same driver in terms of the service. So same product, same service, but the business model innovation is what transformed the whole industry of transport, of conveyance, for example. Now, the sharing economy principally says that I can borrow for a certain time something that you have as an equipment which is idle, and I can make use of it. It all started, if someone remembers, from about 15 years ago, an app in England called What's Mine is Yours. So if I had a lawnmower in the neighborhood, you don't have to buy a lawnmower. You can borrow mine when you need it, provided that you put on the same app something else that you have, perhaps a trailer that I don't have, and I can use it. So what's mine is yours started this whole revolution of the shared economy. We all have things that we don't use. I bet you some people even have cars that the driver goes to switch on and just move front and forward just to keep those alive. What if those cars can be rented the same way we showed there in terms, and there will be services to take your assets and rent it to others and supply it to others. The shared economy is basically even moved us as human to be used part-time, and that will come later. So it introduced a very important concept. It's not business to consumer anymore. It's consumer to consumer. I'm agreeing directly as an end user with another end user to use my equipment, perhaps for a fee or for a return, a barter return. So temporary access to services, physical goods, and assets that you don't own. You don't have to own. So this whole sense of ownership is gone in the shared economy. And it's going to be increasing. People that made their money on selling commodities are going to be impacted the most by the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the gig economy is a result of the the gig work economy is a result of the shared economy. People go for a part of time It started from, the word came from gigs, when people go and sing in a bar or in a lobby of a hotel, or a pianist can play in a hotel. That's a gig. And now people do that for many other jobs, many other skills. And they do the job and they get paid for the time that they delivered the service with their unique skill, and they're paid according to skill. So they're freelancers, they're independent contractors, they contract directly, they are project-based, you come and do your gig and go. Temporary and part-time hires is something that I know the government is regulating, and it's now increasing. Task-oriented, I called it here assignees, because in my previous lectures a few years ago, I was calling it task-oriented employment. But people are worried about, employing people and then moving them around. So assignees, you just assign them a task, they get paid for the task. The task can be repetitive. So if you have an accountant that you will do your monthly accounts, can come at a certain time of a month to do your accounts and leave to do another company's accounts. So these are assignees. They're not necessarily employees that will be looked after by the HR development officers or leaders that we have with us today. Now, the gig economy is a lonely affair where you are working independent from a corporation. So you lose the support of the corporation. And in this kind of environment, you produce or perish. If you don't produce, you go. And therefore, individual productivity will go up. Hence, what I said earlier, that there will not be enough work. If individual productivity goes up, if machines take a lot of the work, then the number of working hours has to go down. And I know that England is considering a 4-day week. There is some, I think the Labour Party is looking at a 4-day weeks. And Your Excellency, we have the Korean ambassador here. I think Korea is also looking at compensating or asking companies that automate work to pay some tax in order to provide employment for others. So people are already preparing from a regulatory point of view for this kind of change. So the gig worker has to be skilled in everything. And there's one very important part I want to talk about is the social skill. They need to be able to please the customer. Because if you're someone working for a big organization, right, what do? You basically, if you're an engineer in a Montel, you don't worry about pleasing the customer. You just deliver the service through the system. But somebody else pleases the customer. Somebody else builds the customer, and so on. I tried to work in the gig economy. It was very difficult. The most difficult thing for me was to bill and collect. It's very embarrassing to say, to a company in Holland, look, I did give you a presentation in 2016. You haven't paid me yet. So you need to do that on your own now in the gig economy. It can become very lonely, but you need a social skill to keep the customers coming back to you. And then in the gig economy, it's very difficult to scale up. There's only one of you. So how do you scale up? You create a reputation. So you need to have also a marketing and branding experience. And by your reputation, for example, if you are a master plumber, then many other plumbers, that's not to say that the people who operate in the gig economy are all plumbers, but a simple example is a plumber. You can't be plumbing the whole neighborhood. You could do the difficult jobs and then assign other jobs under your brand, under your name, to younger or less experienced plumbers. So you create jobs for others. Because some people say that it's all about individualism. The gig economy will not create jobs. No, the trust, it's all about legitimacy and trust and rating. If people rate you really high, they will trust whoever comes through you. Okay, now back to HR. Now, who is the employer when you're working for Uber? Who's the employer? The employer is the app, right? But is the app the boss? When people ask the people who work for these apps, who actually, the people who are Uber drivers are, you can call them gig economy players, because he's working with his time. He chooses when to work, and he has to handle the relationship with the passenger, and he gets the money from Uber, right? So now, who do you think is the boss? The new boss, the real boss, is the customer. Customers have now been spoiled by the Uber and likes. They can choose, they can kind of cross you and choose the next driver if they want, and they can rate you. They can decide to tip you or not to tip you. They can report you. They can choose what car, what color, right? They can cancel. That's very important as well, as long as they can pay for it. There's so much freedom is now with the customer. And if there are enough customers that complained about you, you don't need HR to fire you. The app will fire you. The app is the employer. The app will fire you without consulting HR or legal affairs or the Ministry of Labor. They will just fire you. You will be crossed, blacklisted from the app. Okay, so is HR ready? Now, this is what you need to talk about. Is HR ready for a time when we will be using human as a service? In our industry, Dr. Salim would testify that we use software as a service. Now, we're talking today about human as a service. If we're going to use them part-time here, part-time there, we're going to use them to deliver something for us or to do a task for us. It's human as a service, right? Is HR ready to manage human as a service? But do we need HR? That's another question that some scholars are asking about, because only a few years ago, we didn't have HR. Actually, it was called something else. I think most of the people in the front row, excuse me, were hired by personnel, not by HR. Yeah, دارت شؤون الموظفين أنا عينتني أول مرة, if you remember. So HR was sabotage. So HR is the new thing. This is a recent picture after the invention of camera, of course, of people queuing to take their daily rates. Doesn't that ring a bell when you talk about freelancing and gig economy? You work for yourself, for your day, you get paid for your day. You don't have a real relationship with the organization. HR doesn't get into it, right? There's payroll maybe, but not HR, not full-fledged HR. Somebody recruits you, and normally it's the business owner or the foreman. The business side sort of hires you for the right job. If you're big and strong, they hire you to lift stuff. And then you get paid at the end of the day. And that was quite recent. So is HR come and gone? Or can we reform HR? That's something that we need to talk about over the next 3 days. Many people have been to many conferences recently online, and then more recently in Europe, 3 conferences. People worry too much and take too long to talk about what leads to what. Does society change leads to adapting technology? Does technology leads to society change? How? Let's not worry about that. Let's talk about embracing change and moving along. Here, more in the GCC, we went through what I call the building the nation stage, which is the infrastructure stage. We didn't have all these roads and airports, ports and everything. So we had to build all of that. That required a different set of skills. I have dealt with HR people who have hired 3,000 staff. Okay, and next phase, if you consider Dubai as an example, and Doha, they have built everything. Now they are doing the service stage. People come to enjoy all the big hotels, the big airports, the events that happen in these 2 towns. So they hire people now to provide that service, right? So we've now been in the service stage. The next stage is the experience phase. So we're moving from the building the nation, which is the infrastructure stage, the service stage, and into the experience. How do we create a new, enjoyable leisure-oriented kind of experience for everyone. As we said, the new culture will be a leisure culture. If I have a good experience at your company, I'm going to come back. So the new culture is going to be all about the work culture, about providing an experience. That's just to prove that we're not, with 3D printing, we're not going to need all those people to build. So it's not going to be about quantity. It's about what talent, as Dr. Salam said. Who do we choose? And as I said earlier, we choose people who are adaptable. In Oman, so that we bring it along, Dr. Fatma, she's actually was at your ministry, Your Excellency. Dr. Fatma Al-Hajri and I did research on the yuppies and dinks in Oman. And we found that those segments are growing. And if you just show the picture again, it's just pictures and we close. And so that was, the one earlier was the yuppies who just come from the villages to work in Muscat and they don't get married, right? And then we had the dinks, and we have seen growth in both, in the yuppies and dinks in Oman. So what is happened in the West in the 80s is happening to us now, and we have the numbers to prove it in a research. The change is coming. I think who does the work, how work gets done is the question that HR leaders have to discuss and answer during this conference. And the kind of people we're going to be bringing, not necessarily those kind of workers, people who can work, they don't have to come to Oman. They will work with us from abroad. They're going to collaborate. So it's all about international collaboration. On terms of, diversity and inclusion, females are going to be able to do jobs that are traditionally done by men because technology will allow them that access, like joystick robotics. And also diversity and inclusion, you're going to need the skills of all those people and the knowledge of all those people from different nationalities, different age groups. When we talk about diversity, often we only consider gender and nationality. But age is a very important generational gap when it comes to diversity and inclusion. You have to have in every team a diversity in ages in order to fulfill the whole experience that they're trying to create. So how do you get there? Imagination, creativity. I remember Professor Thornton, one of my AI professors in Sussex University, said the main thing that separates us as human from other intelligent animals is our ability to imagine. And we should foster more imagination. CR and I yesterday over dinner were talking about how do we foster imagination in big organizations. We are talking about a specific big organization in India. How do we foster imagination and creativity? Imagination is what gets you from there to there. And the AirPods is the highest margin for Apple. It's not the iPhone. It's just someone that sees something and imagine how it could be done easier through innovation. And because imagination is the source of the true intelligence at this source. We've already talked about the numbers that need to be reskilled. I think Amer put 120 million. Yeah, 120 million based on IBM. I think 50% of skills will have to be over time changed. So mastering the art of learning is very important. We need to master the art of learning and relearning, reskilling. That's what the top 25 skills. I think emotional intelligence will prevail over the next few years because that's where you create the experience. You either create it through the human-to-human interaction or through the devices and algorithms and machines that you create, apps that you create should have some emotional intelligence feed. Last slide. The new KPIs for leaders is to keep people inspired. That is the true KPI going forward for leaders. Keep people inspired to continue to innovate and improve productivity and experience to your customers. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amer. As most of you may know, we organize COMEX, the technology show of Oman, as well as GHEDEX, the higher education show of Oman, for 20 years. And as Dr. Amer Rawas said, I've been talking to some leading international universities, and they've been planning to open MSc in curiosity, MSc in critical thinking. So these are the new courses coming up. So this is something very different. We could not have imagined 5 years ago that there will be an MSc in curiosity. Thank you so much, Dr. Amer.